Red Dawn were formed back in 1992 in the New Jersey town Iselin by the now 3-time Grammy-nominated keyboardist, synthesizer programmer, orchestrator and producer David Rosenthal. At this point in his career, Rosenthal was far from a beginner. He was born in 1961 in Edison, New Jersey, where he was the only musician in his family. At the age of 7, he began taking piano lessons, and by 12 he was playing in different cover bands. His group, Crystal Visions, even won Best Instrumental Group in a 1978 statewide talent expo. In 1981, Rosenthal graduated from Berklee College of Music, where he played in a band with Steve Vai called Morning Thunder. His big break would come that same year when he joined forces with a now legendary band Rainbow, which has housed iconic musicians such as Ronnie James Dio and Ritchie Blackmore. A friend of a friend told me that Ritchie Blackmore was looking for a new keyboard player, so I sent him a cassette. It was my cover band playing a bunch of different rock tunes on one side, and on the other side was my senior classical piano recital where I played all this crazy stuff. I knew he was into classical as well. He heard that and invited me to audition out on Long Island. It was a cattle call. I went there and they narrowed it down to me and one other guy, and then I got the gig. His first album with the band and his debut would be the 1982 release Straight Between the Eyes, and Rosenthal explains that he was only 20 when the recording of the record was made. I sat in the control room during the recording of this entire album so that I could learn as much as possible about the recording process, says David Rosenthal. The album would feature the hit Stone Cold, which got quite a lot of airtime. Rosenthal's orchestrations in the track Eyes on Fire was performed by Montreal Symphony, and this was the first time he had ever heard one of his orchestrations performed. Rosenthal would stay with the band and play on the 1983 release Bent Out of Shape, which contained the hit single Street of Dreams. This was also the first time Rosenthal would play with drummer Chuck Birgi, who would later join Red Dawn. Rainbow would go on to disband in 1984, following the departure of guitarist Ritchie Blackmore, who would go on to join Deep Purple once again. But Rosenthal's career continued to propel upward during the 1980s. He would go on to do jobs such as playing keyboards for Cyndi Lauper on the True Colors World Tour 86-87 and also appear on Whitesnake's 1989 album release Slip of the Tongue, just to name a few. During his hugely successful career in the 1980s and early 90s, he had gathered quite a bit of experience. And then, in 1992, he got the opportunity to do something that he'd always wanted to do. Throughout my career, I always wanted to have my own band. I finally got the opportunity in 1992 when I signed a contract with EMI Toshiba. Although I had been looking for a record deal for many years, when I finally got one, I no longer had a band. So I held auditions with a very select group of some of the most talented musicians I had ever worked with. We chose the name Red Dawn, and it turned out to be the best band I had ever played in. The entire project was a great musical experience, and the release of this album was a personal milestone in my career. So who were these incredibly talented musicians that Rosenthal had chosen to work with? Let's go over the lineup and their backgrounds. The easiest member to start off with is probably the previously mentioned drummer Chuck Birgi, since he'd worked with Rosenthal during his time in Rainbow. At this time he was, like Rosenthal, pretty seasoned, since he'd worked with Hall & Oates in the early 80s, and after his time in Rainbow he would go on to work with artists such as Bon Jovi and Meatloaf. He would also recruit bassist Greg Smith, who had previously worked with Wendy O. Williams and Vinnie Moore. Then he would pick out guitarist Tristan Avakian, who had previously played with Mitch Alloy. And last but certainly not least, Rosenthal would pick out Larry Baud as vocalist, and he had previously made his living by teaching at a high school. Their first release would come on November 25th, 1992. It was a mini-CD containing 2 tracks and released in Japan only by the Inside Out label, which is a division of EMI Toshiba. The first of the 2 tracks is just classic straightforward AOR rock, and I think it's really well executed. Let's take a listen to 2 parts of this song. Once again, I have to credit David Rosenthal not only for the incredibly clean production, but also the way he incorporates synth into these tracks, and you can tell he's a killer orchestrator. The second track on the mini CD, Christine, I still appreciate, but I find it a little bit too glammy for my taste. Let's take a listen and you can decide for yourself.
I'm getting tired of your masquerade. Tell me, baby, are you stepping away? Christine, gotta know right now what you mean. Christine, gotta know right now what you're gonna be.
With a strong debut release backing them, Red Dawn would go on to release their first full-length studio album, titled Never Say Surrender, on March 17th, 1993. Once again, it would be given out by Inside Out Records and exclusively in Japan. The release would gain some traction, and due to that, it would also be released in the UK in 1994. The two tracks that were released on the previous mini CD would also be featured on this record, with Liar now being the third track and Christine being the seventh. I think the best song on the album is without a doubt the opening track, Flying High, which, a bit like Liar on their previous mini CD, is just a really straightforward classic AOR rock song with great tempo. Let's take a listen.
Big wig in a penthouse suite, got a piece of all the action. Everything you touch just turns to gold. Trying to trip it, but you fell on your face. You knocked me down, but I'm back in the race. Now flying high, never touch the ground. You can try, but you'll never bring me down. Flying high, never slow me down. You can try, but you'll never bring me. You can try, but you'll never bring me down.
Another one of the stand-on tracks is in my opinion the second track, I'll Be There, and on April 21st, 1993, they actually played this live in Japan, and it's one of the few live videos of the band, so let's take a listen to that version instead.
ありますね、ずっとそこに。そうですか、わかりました。早速演奏していただきましょう。レッドオンです。
I've been hard on you, I know. I'm going through some changes. Love has been a rocky road full of complications. Creeps up behind me. I leave my cards on the table, ready to show my hand. I'll be there, and I'm gonna be in your heart forever. I'll be there. Anytime you want me, I'll be there.
The last track I'd like to showcase is the fifth track, Promises, where the tempo is once again slowed down a bit and Baud's vocals really shine. The band didn't really have a definitive breakup, but rather they started fading out, and this had numerous reasons. One of the reasons was the fact that grunge and alternative rock were really the growing genres of the early 1990s, and therefore AOR became a little bit unfashionable. On top of that, most of the band members had other previous commitments and they would eventually move on to higher profile gigs. Although some rumors of a second album being in the making started circulating in 1996, this would never happen and Red Dawn faded into obscurity. So what happened to all these hugely successful musicians after the band ended? Well, let's go over them all once again. The architect behind it all, David Rosenthal, would land the role of keyboardist and musical director for Billy Joel, and he has held this position ever since. He has also played with artists like Yngwie Malmsteen and designed advanced synthesizer rigs for artists like Bruce Springsteen. Drummer Chuck Birgi would go on to play with Blue Oyster Cult, Meatloaf and Enrique Iglesias, and he'd also spend years drumming alongside Rosenthal as part of the Billy Joel band during tour. Bassist Greg Smith would tour with Alice Cooper, but also play with artists such as Vinnie Moore and Ted Nugent. Guitarist Tristan Avakian went on to composing music for theater, television and also film. Vocalist Larry Bod would retreat from the spotlight and start living a normal life once again.